So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for how knowledge management supports your changing operation. I think this is quite a key topic right now, as we have been experiencing over the last few months and the changes that contact centres are going to be going through. So I'm Lee Hopwood, I'm the CEO here at the CCMA, and I'm going to be joined today by two experts in the field of knowledge management. John Balesfield, who is a solutions consultant at Verint, and he's Verint's resident expert in knowledge management, so it'll be interesting to hear his views shortly. And we'll also be joined by Paul Belby. He's a knowledge manager for Equinity, and he's used his experience as a contact centre manager for over 12 years to really ensure that current knowledge is understood and relevant and accessible to advisors. So it'll be interesting to hear his story too. So this is an opportunity for you to ask questions. And so we have got the Q&A section within Zoom, which hopefully you can see at the bottom of your screen. If you hover your mouse over the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see that there's a Q&A window. Feel free to click on that and ask questions. Obviously, I do have some questions too, so I will be asking those questions, but I'll be looking out for your questions. It is obviously an opportunity to interact, but it's really done through the written word. Your microphone is muted. There's a lot of people on the call, so obviously that's just good practice, I think. So in a moment, I'm going to ask John to crack on and to set the scene around knowledge management. I'll then ask Paul to share his story before we then go into the Q&A, and then I'll wrap up at the end. So we've got about an hour. There's lots to say, lots to share, lots of questions to ask. So John, if I could invite you to please join me on screen. And I will shortly disappear once John is up on the video. I will shortly just disappear and leave you in John's hands. Over to you, John.
Thank you, Lee. Hello, everybody, and good afternoon. So yes, as Lee said, my name is John Balesfield. I'm a solutions consultant at Verint. And what I'd like to do really just to start off with today is take you through a little quick overview of what Verint does within the knowledge management space. What our offering is, talk a little bit about what our customers have done, and that's kind of a wide picture, but also perhaps touch on some of the challenges that they've had over the last few months, and then maybe talk about some of the trends that we've seen, both from a kind of strategic perspective and also more recently as well. So really what I'd like to start with is just kind of an overview of the approach that Verint takes for knowledge management. And we really view this as talking about knowledge as a service rather than a specific offering in any one particular part of business. So we can actually offer four kind of core approaches to knowledge. Those are, as you can see on screen, within customer self-service. So that could be dedicated help portals, that could be accessed through a specific user interface. It could be integration of knowledge into those customer channels. Also agent knowledge bases, obviously for the contact center advisors. This is offering knowledge directly into the contact centers to support the processes, etc. So that could be, again, a dedicated knowledge portal that actually serves those contact center advisors. Or it could be integration of knowledge into things like CRM, into agent desktops, into chat systems, etc. We also, and probably those first two are the ones that we'll mostly talk about, but we also can actually offer the same platform, the same service into elements such as workforce, employee workforces, HR shared services. So actually internally focused for employees, but outside of that contact center. And the fourth area I've touched on already in terms of integration is really creating that platform. This is really where knowledge as a service comes into its own, is creating that platform where knowledge can actually be disseminated, be published, be consumed through any platform, any technology, any channel. And the real key part is that actually any client, any implementation could actually serve all of these from a single source. And we'll touch on some of that later on, that kind of approach to the single source of truth across an entire business. So what kind of differentiates the Verint offering really versus any other knowledge offering from other vendors really? So kind of four key things which are different in the way that we approach knowledge and that we can offer knowledge into our clients. So first one is offering cognitive intelligence. Now that sounds amazing. So what is that? What that means is that the actual search engine, which is within the Verint tool, is understanding what people are actually searching for, and understanding what they mean when they search for something, and is able to automatically find relevant knowledge without necessarily having exactly the keywords directly within the articles that they're looking for. Other systems may have some similar approach, but it may take training, it may take manual effort to do that. Ours is fully automated. The other element is this kind of approach to zero-click knowledge. So we're really trying to be making knowledge contextual to what you're doing and bringing that knowledge into the journey, into the process that you're working on. So that could be through an integration, but it could also be through just providing contextual knowledge in relation to the knowledge that you're currently consuming. Again, fully automatic. We've touched on this already, so completely channel tech and tech agnostic. So that knowledge as a service layer can be consumed really from any touch points, any channel, any type of audience, customers, agents, employees. And the final thing really is that all of that intelligence that sits within the platform can be extremely rapidly deployed. So very, very light touch from a administration perspective, and very low total cost of ownership as well. So an example of how we can be deployed, or how we have been deployed for some of our clients and some of the results that they've had. So one of our clients, Utility Warehouse, if we just go back a slide, sorry. One of our clients, Utility Warehouse, actually have multiple different channels deployed from a single instance of Verint Knowledge Management. So on the left, of course, they've got the agent or the advisor. It looks like we might have an animation or something going on the slide. Sorry about that. It seems to be automatically changing. So yeah, on the left-hand side, we've got the agent interface. And actually, Utility Warehouse started with that agent portal on the left-hand side and built up a really big asset of knowledge that they could then start utilizing. And I can see Sarah's probably trying to just adjust the slideware. So I'll keep talking anyway. So they could really expose and utilize that knowledge and expand on that knowledge through the agent interface. And that's a dedicated portal specifically for agents. So it's really been customized. It's very bespoke to the use cases that they need. They've also, though, got a partner distributor network of about 47,000 individuals who utilize a different version of that same knowledge through a different interface. And thirdly, then they've got customers also, and actually they've got multiple variations of customers able to utilize knowledge from that single platform. What this has allowed them to do, you can see some of the results that they've got on screen there, is in a very consistent way across all of those different channels, improve the efficiency of their customer deployment. So they've been able to improve their NPS by 10 points. They've been able to reduce their average handling time. And really the key part about that is actually they've reduced the AHT by focusing and working with us to focus on things like hold time, search time, and wrap time. Actually, that AHT dropped at the same time that their talk time was able to be lifted up because they had better access to knowledge. We move on, so they currently have about 1,500 agents, and actually, you know, kind of toward the end of March, utilizing this embedded, well utilized knowledge base, they were able to pretty much overnight move those 1,500 agents to remote working. They've seen an incredibly smooth transition, you know, kind of immediate move over to working from home with very little impact, because they had this this well-ingrained knowledge source that their agents could utilize. They've also moved things like team briefings, which obviously, you know, back in the day, I guess, were done in person or in meeting rooms. They've actually utilized the knowledge base to migrate those team briefings over into that single source of truth and broadcast and track that through the knowledge base. And just another example, Sainsbury's came to us and were looking for a knowledge repository. Actually, while they were talking to us, they went through the acquisition or the merging of the Argos brand and the Habitat brand. So immediately needed something which was able to adapt and support that merging. So obviously those dispersed agents were now utilizing or needed to utilize a single source of truth, a single knowledge base. And actually it's not just the retail brands, it's actually also utilized by the banking and the finance arms. And it's utilized through the contact center, it's utilized through self-service. And as you said, it's a multiple brand deployment. So they've seen some great results that you can see on screen. And actually one of the really interesting things that we can come on and talk to a little bit later is they've actually utilized the self-service knowledge base that we deployed for them to triage inbound contacts, and through more effectively triaging those contacts using what we call decision trees to actually guide customers to the right path, they've actually had a massive reduction in unnecessary inbound contacts and reduction in escalations as well by making sure those contacts get to the right place at the right time. So I'd just like to move on now to a couple of examples of some strategic shifts that we've seen in the industry or in our experience. So I'll just touch on these briefly and then we can go into a bit more depth. So the first one really is what have we seen more generally in the kind of knowledge management space? So I think the first thing is, we're seeing customers moving beyond the kind of conversation about the cloud. So in the last 5 to 10 years, the conversation has been, shall we move to the cloud? I think people are more relaxed about that, and it's becoming more common to move into the cloud. So that's kind of done and dusted, really. But what we're seeing is there's a much more in-depth adoption of cloud and a much more tech-savvy awareness of what actually the cloud can enable. So, clients are looking for a bigger bang for your buck, if you like. So how can they get more out of that? They're more able to look at things like integrations into the kind of AWS microservice approach to utilizing things like knowledge as a service through APIs to pull knowledge in and get the most out of technology. I think from a kind of single source of truth perspective, what we used to see is that this was perhaps starting with self-service, knowledge would be embedded into self-service for customers. And nobody would look at contact center. That shift changed. So we moved from self-service first to contact center as the deployment to get more efficiencies out of the contact center. I think what we're seeing now, though, is actually people are looking at contact center first, but want to then move into the self-service, into back office, into field staff, into branch. So they're really starting to look at it as a process rather than just individual implementations of knowledge, so a unified solution rather than individual pieces. And the third thing there is, again, bang for your buck. It's knowledge everywhere. This concept of actually utilizing knowledge from a single source to populate as many different touch points as possible. So with technology changing rapidly, it's keeping up with all of those different changes in technology and making sure that knowledge can be embedded and consumed regardless of channel, regardless of audience, regardless of touch point. And the final piece I just want to touch to is what we've seen more recently. So, over the last 4 or 5 months, really. So, the kind of elephant in the room, I suppose, is working from home. Is this becoming the new normal? Well, it certainly is at the moment. And really, that's not just about pushing knowledge out. It's actually about utilizing knowledge as much as possible to maintain communication bi-directionally, shifting training to be within an online system rather than having to be done between staff, I suppose. It's about also retaining the knowledge that's in those advisors' heads now that they can't have those in-person conversations. And will this be a continual change? Will this actually stay as it is, or will it go back to what the previous normal was? We've seen a massive increase in the change rate. That could be through just changes in expectations from customers, dealing with in different ways, different prioritizations of customer and how knowledge can support that. A continuous change, obviously, in policy, whether it's through the government or through business, and how do businesses actually keep up with that change in a consistent, accurate, approved way. And I think the last thing is, there's been a huge shift in how knowledge is consumed and how businesses operate, and how we can actually maintain that momentum after these rapid immediate changes. How can we build on what's had to be implemented quickly so that we've got a better platform going forwards? So with that, I'll pass back to Lee.
Thank you very much, John. And in particular, thank you for sharing your stories around Utility Warehouse and the Sainsbury's Argos Habitat story. I think they just demonstrate just how important knowledge management is right now to enable that fast moving, that quick change. And I know you've got more stories that we'll be sharing with, hopefully you can hear me. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
So yeah, I know you've got more stories that you're sharing through a link. We'll send a link out after the event with access to those stories. So thank you for sharing those and where knowledge management's going. So if I may now ask Paul to join us. Paul, you've got some really interesting stories of your own, and looking at what Equinity has done over the last year or so, and in particular how you've responded to the pandemic using knowledge and knowledge management. So if I may, Paul, hand over to you, that would be great.
Wonderful. Yeah, thanks, Lee, and thanks, John. Good afternoon, everybody. So my name's Paul Bilby. I am the knowledge manager here at Equinity, and for the past 12 to 24 months, I've had the pleasure of working with Verint with their knowledge management tools. So today I'm going to talk you through a little bit about the history of Equinity, so who are Equinity, and why knowledge automation plays a leading role in our digital strategy. So I was introduced to Verint by Stephen Green, who is the head of our digital strategy, as you can see from the slide, into the world of knowledge management and why it's so important to us. So a little bit about Equinity first. So we, as an employer, have over 5,000 employees who operate in locations all across the world. So the UK, the US, India, 120 other countries. And we touch about 36 million people around the world through international technology, payments, services. We send out billions of payments each year through either pensions, employee schemes, or payouts from shares such as dividends. And we're part of the FTSE 250, which is really important because it means that we've got eyes on us. So we've got people who want to make sure we're doing the right thing as quickly as we can, as best we can for our customers and our shareholders. And with that, meant as part of our digital strategy, we had to look at adapting to a new breed of investor. So we know, and John touched upon this earlier, so next slide, please, that the new breed of investor is digitally enabled. So you and I, if we want an answer to something, we're going to go online. We're going to phone somewhere. We're going to contact somebody with as little detail needed as possible. We expect an answer. And we expect to be able to do that across multiple devices as well. So phone, iPad, tablet, anything like that. And we're also all increasingly willing to become more available to self-serve. So we don't want to contact people if we don't have to. We should be able to go online, find an answer as easy as possible with high expectations to that answer being the only answer that I need and no follow-up questions. But we also wanted to touch on the final part on that last slide, was just the fact that we needed to cater for investors that were novice all the way up to expert. So we had to look at our knowledge management tool to say, how can we actually do that and make it easy and visible for them to understand? So next slide, please. So our approach, so with Equinity, we took a two-phase approach to introducing knowledge management to our service. So phase one was the customer-facing element. So that was the online integration through our website, through our help portals, for our customers under one of our brands, Self-Trade. And that went live in November of 2017. And the reason that we went live first with the customer facing and not the internal is so that we could gather the tone and the voice of the customer. So what was the customer searching for? Because that's the voice that the customer is going to use when they contact us by phone if they can't find an answer. So we tracked that for about 12 months before we actually made the leap into phase two, which was the representative assist, or the internal knowledge management system that we looked to replace our existing sort of platforms. And I was lucky enough to be able to lead that internal integration and use the data that we found from the external source to build into how we created our FAQs and our knowledge through the algorithms that John mentioned in Verint's administration console. So that went live in about October of 2018, and we've been there ever since. And we've been steady. So this is, I suppose, where we need to shift from being steady to where we are now. So from October 2018 up until February, March of this year, we were steady. So our integration was good. We understood what the representatives in-house needed, and we carried out bi-daily checks of search results so we could make sure what the representatives were searching, they were getting the answers that they needed. But that shifted. That shifted in March of this year when the pandemic started and when working from home started. And similarly to Utility Warehouse, Equinity, we were also able to, in a matter of days, pick up our experience centre of over 350 FTE and send them home to remote work. We saw an increase of this, of 50% in COVID-related issues on calls, but that also actually meant that we saw a huge jump up in our email communication channels, something that at that point we hadn't really touched with knowledge management because we were so focused on calls being our day-to-day. But within 2 days, we were able to redeploy multi-skilled agents and also upskill agents or representatives to be able to handle more complex queries, more complex ways of dealing with customer communications, either through CRMs or through email inboxes, which was now seeing a higher level of delivery, but at the same time have 100% confidence. So what we actually did was we carried out every other day training sessions through the knowledge management tool. And that way we were able to not only show the representatives the information that were being trained, but also speak them through with how they would search for that information if they needed support. And that allowed us in the background to tweak the articles if we needed to work on the algorithms, or to put in some keywords or tags that would allow those users to access the information in a quicker way. And for us, that was really, really important. And over the course of, I say, 2 or 3 days, we were able to upskill nearly 300 people to 1 or 2, if not more, new services in the business just by using knowledge automation. On the back of that, we actually saw some interesting results. So if we went back 12 months and had a look at our figures, we were averaging 2,500 searches maybe per calendar month, with no more than 3,000 entry views perhaps, and about 5,000 sessions. Now through the pandemic, it's actually made us more relevant and more aware to the rest of the business. We're physically, as I say, able to hold one-to-one sessions with teams on a weekly basis through either Skype or through Zoom or any other channel, and ask them the calls that they were getting. So what do you need support in? As well as using the very simple and easy to use search download that we have through Verint to be able to put ourselves in the representative's shoes. And this is something that I really take seriously, and I'm proud that we do. So every day or every other day, we will do a mass download of the representative's searches and what they were searching for a customer. And we hold that against the actual result that they find. And what we're interested in is, does that answer pop up within the first 5 questions? And we're currently sitting at around 95-96% success rate with that, which is great. But there are still a few that slip through our fingers. So we have to really ensure that we are putting ourselves in the shoes of every representative to carry out those searches, document them, make changes where applicable in real time, and then get a real-time result so we can reapply and retest. And that's really key at the moment for that 100% agent confidence, because if they're not brought into the system that you're using, then they won't use it, and they'll start reverting to how else can we ask for help, who else is available, and then we start to see quality drop off the edge of the cliff, and that's something we don't want. So that's sort of what we've used knowledge management for, and at the moment I can announce that we are currently seeing about 4,800 search results per calendar month, nearly 9,000 entry views, and we're up to about 7,500 sessions per calendar month, just through being visible and showing people the ease to use the knowledge management tool through Verint. And along the way, which I'm hoping we'll cover in the Q&A, we've also been able to bring in the engagement side of the business. So working from home can be, for some people, draining, it can have impact on their mental health, it can have impacts on their concentration levels. So we've used knowledge management to play some games with people, to throw a bit of fun into the knowledge. And with the management system that we have through Verint, we can put up a fun article. So it could be a did you know fact, it could be a link to a game through an external source on like a SharePoint site, it could be an internal video of all of our colleagues in our customer experience center doing a flash mob dance with one of our favorite songs, Michael Jackson's Beat It, which we've done. But we were able to upload that through knowledge management, track it, and then automate that to come down so it isn't left there for months, so we don't have to remember about it. So yeah, so for us, knowledge management has played a huge part in the pandemic, with being able to get people up to speed faster, quicker, and as a single source of truth.
Thank you very much, Paul. That was really interesting, and it'd be great to explore a little bit more about all those fun stuff that you've been implementing to use knowledge management even more effectively. So, if I may ask John to come back and join us, and we shall stop sharing the slides so that you just see our faces. And thank you very much. So, obviously, you've been using knowledge management for a while there, Paul, and it clearly is embedded in the organisation. You're clearly seeing the benefits, in particular in recent months. But my first question to you, and by the way, everybody, please do put your questions into the Q&A. Feel free to do that, and we will come back to the questions that are there. My first question for you, Paul, is how do you create a culture of knowledge in an organisation? How do you get to that point where the need and the want for that knowledge is recognised?
Yeah, so I suppose it is a difficult question. We had to really play it by trial and error, if I'm honest with you. With everybody, you bring something new to the table, and everybody, first of all, will only compare it to the last thing that you did as a business. And that isn't to say that Equinity failed anything that we did, because we didn't. But people always have questions and reservations of, does it work? And through what John was saying earlier, that the simplicity of the admin console of being able to create articles with tags and use what we'd learned through our 12 years of experience as representatives ourselves and those people that handled calls with our customers, we were able to put in as much sort of tags or as information as we thought would work with the algorithm. And then we kind of had to, I'll be honest, we had to put it out there into the open and to say, we've created all of these different tags, all of these different questions that you can search. I think we went live with about 2,500. How does it look? Yeah, and we had to really push to gather feedback. And in some cases it worked, in some cases it didn't work, because people, like to cut corners, they want to search for things quicker. So they were themselves, they were that new breed of investor. They wanted the answer even quicker than having to search a question. So that's where we brought in that daily or bi-daily search results criteria. So we could then go back and say, look, we recognize that you are having troubles finding this question. This is how quickly we've turned it around for you. This is how quickly you've got the answer, which is now that one-stop shop for single source of truth, and build on that on a week-by-week or day-by-day basis, really. And over the years, that's what's helped us get where we are.
No, I think that's a good shout, and in fact, I'm actually that leads us nicely into one of the questions that's come through on the board, which actually, John, I'm going to come to you. But in essence, when you've got so much information, so much knowledge that you need to put into a system, how do you do that? How do you prioritise what needs to go in, and how do you provide a way for agents to highlight if anything is missing?
Yeah, great question. It's really about the kind of evolution of knowledge, but also could be from a kind of implementation perspective. How do you get started? So generally, businesses have that information as a resource. It could well be that it's classified or seen as information rather than knowledge, which is a key distinction, really. Information in my mind might be documents stored within SharePoint, which are 10 pages long, for example. Knowledge, in contrast, is I've got a question. What is the answer to that question? So there's a kind of a shift in approach to be able to migrate and actually utilize knowledge and get up to speed in an efficient way. And really that process should be a kind of an 80-20 principle. It's analyze what does the business need the agents to know, what do the agents need to know, and maybe what do the customers need to know, and focus on those key things. And then pull out the 20 that top that list, or the 20% that top that list, and focus on getting the most impact from those as possible. The rest of that information that still exists and still referenceable and still utilized could be imported into the knowledge base as a kind of a legacy, if you like, resource, but then utilize things like feedback, things like, as Paul mentioned, actually search reports to identify actually what are agents actually looking for, and are they able to get the search results. It's really interesting to hear what Paul was saying, is that they're actually actively looking at what agents are looking for, and are they getting a result that answers their question within the top 3 or 4, or I think he said 5 or 6 results. Utilizing that MI is going to give you as much as possible the insight into telling you what you next need to focus on, maybe on the next revision, the next month or the next week. So you can focus on that next 20% that you should focus on. And over a course of a few months, you'll get to the majority of the content which advisors need on a daily basis, and move hopefully from that kind of informational approach of multiple pages of answer to a knowledge approach, which is, I can search for something and I can get the answer immediately from the knowledge base.
I guess that really does play into the next question, and it'll give Paul a chance to respond to it, respond to what you've just said. There is, once all of that knowledge is in, whether you do it over that phased approach as you described, how on earth do you keep that up to date? There's so much information in there. How do you keep that up to date? And one of the questions that's come in is, what is your experience of more experienced representatives adapting the system rather than relying on the memory to ensure the change works and that it's consistent in accuracy? So it's kind of dovetailing the question that I wanted to ask and the question that we've had in. Paul, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, so I'll try and cover that in 2 parts, really. So number one, if we focus on the experienced representatives who, kind of think they know it all, and they don't really want to open up to a tool telling them what to do as opposed to their own sort of memory. That's where we actually did one-on-one sessions with our legacy staff and sat down and showed them the features that our internal knowledge management system had, and to point out to them, the focus that we really played on was everything that you know so far will be in there. However, keep an eye on, and we've got a section called latest updated. So keep an eye on the latest updated section, because every time you see a subject that you go, oh, I know that, I know what the outcome is. If it's in that latest updated, it's changed. So you need to just be alert, and you need to be asking, keeping an eye on that particular area as opposed to searching more advancedly, and go from there. And gradually, what we actually found was, we found those more experienced representatives were actually doing the most searches, because they wanted to test us against that. Okay, well, if it's in there, let's prove that it's in there. And coming on to what John said, so we had these representatives actually go through and search key things that they were like, yeah, I'm the SME in this, and find the articles. And then if they thought there was like a follow-on question that maybe we needed to add or relate to it, use those feedback features that we have. So use that suggested content button, use that feedback on the article to say, no, actually, this is now changed, or I think we could add this part in, and build that sort of relationship, which then in turn built their confidence to go, yeah, I'm going to start using this because it stops people coming to me, and it allows the business to grow and our customers get answers quicker. So that's how we tackled the legacy staff and the people that were really hesitant to get on board to begin with. But for me personally, how do we keep everything else up to date? Comes down to 2 things. One, is it regulated, and therefore does it need sign-off? Because if it does, through our administration console, there's a feature that allows us to set any article that needs to be signed off to have a review period. So we can just sit back and wait for an email to come through to us, which is automated to say, hey, today you need to look at this article and you need to either get it signed off or rechecked as a process, and build that in there. So that actually took one of our previous roles away from us, because we didn't have to sit there and go, today I need to get a list of 5,000 questions I need to sign off. they came to us automatically. And then everything else, yeah, kind of fits into the feedback loop. If there's an update, if it doesn't manage to come through us, one of the management or one of the team leaders will come to us and go, hey, this needs changing, this needs updating. And we can either do it there and then real time, or we can schedule it in to have it published on a set day.
Excellent. Go on, John.
Just to add to what Paul said, I think that the advice we give to our clients generally is get those SMEs involved as early as possible. Get the buy-in from them. Get them to see what you're actually doing. It's not trying to replace them as the experts. It's trying to utilize them as the experts to support it and to improve it. And getting them involved from the beginning and maybe designing things around what they need to see and getting their feedback and responding to their feedback is really, really important. You don't want that suggestions and feedback just to go into a black hole and disappear. You want them to see that actually they're being engaged with. So yeah, getting them involved is probably the best thing possibly to do.
And one of the questions that we've had in, and I think you've addressed the first part around how do you lose bad habits. I think you've addressed that. But the other part of the question that has come in is through implementing knowledge management, have you seen an increase in average handling time? Or have you seen an impact on any of the other KPIs? Obviously, you shared some really, really good ones there, Paul and John, from your experience with Verint as well. But have you seen the impact on other KPIs that maybe hasn't been so good? Finding that balance. John, what's been your experience?
Yeah, I mean, AHT is an interesting one, isn't it? Because it's not necessarily as a single statistic. It's not really representative of actually what's happening, I suppose. So in the utility warehouse example, AHT dropped, but actually, elements within that, that comprise the AHT went up. The benefit of that example is that the one that went up was the talk time. So they could actually have a longer conversation. I think they told their advisors to imagine you're talking to your grandma when you're on the phone, so you can actually have a longer, more friendly conversation. So that sometimes we do see the AHT go up because you've got more access of things to talk about, of things to actually converse about and resolve. I think the side effect perhaps of those kind of stats going up is that maybe in addition, you see things like escalations go down because you can, as Paul said, you can multi-skill people, you can upskill people on areas they wouldn't necessarily be capable of talking about before, so that they're able to address more complex or more varied topics. So certainly, in some cases you see some go up, some go down. The approach that we take is because the interfaces and the solutions that we build are pretty bespoke to each client, is going into talk to contact center team leads and operatives and business senior business people and understand actually what are you trying to achieve, what is the impact that you want to have, and designing something that actually tries to address those. So not just having a broad let's fix all of your KPIs in one fell swoop.
And I guess one of the reasons why AHT might go up is because of the amount of information that there's so much information to go through and get into obviously that nugget, but also when you get to that nugget, how much information do you put in for the advisor to be able to use to respond? So Paul, I'm going to come to you with the next question. In fact, there's a couple of questions. The first one is, do you have a maximum size for your articles to keep users more likely to be engaged with it? That one's coming through the Q&A board. And in addition to that, do you use just text in your articles or images and videos? And what have you found to be most effective? So a couple of things there. One is, how much information do you put in for that article, and the kind of content, the dynamic content that you might use?
Yeah, okay. So we actually, as Equinity, underwent a content review sort of workshop about 6 months ago now. So we took the time ourselves as a business to go through content workshops and kind of break down our existing articles that we'd created in 2018 and 2019 and get some real crit sessions with the users, with people that hadn't accessed the tool before, and said, if we put that in front of you, would you know what you were doing? Does it answer all of your questions? Do you have any more questions? So we went through that on a weekly basis. So we did it every Friday, I think it was. Nice for the weekend. To give those sort of users the chance to go, I like it, but, or it answers my questions, I have no more questions. So for us, we try to focus on the important stuff at top. So here's your answer, even if it's the one word, but then break down where applicable any additional information that you'll need that's a nice to know. So it could be, are there any fees for the account? Yes. But the fees are further down, and try and lay it out in a way that your eye reads left to right. So everything that you need on the left, and then if you're not accompanying with any pictures, any videos on the right hand side, which could be a how to or a click through or a step by step. So the content, we toy with the content. Every user is individual. Every user will have a preference. Some people like it in colors, some people will like it, just plain black. And we pride ourselves in being able to try and match as many of our articles to those users as possible. The second part with, do we just have text? No, we don't. So we have text, we have images, we have videos, we have HTML parts, because the admin console itself allows us to build within HTML text within certain limitations. So it's trial and error. We do find that people like pictures the most, because they can just follow it through. If it's a screen for screen, like for like, they know what they're looking for. Videos, we've used more of an engagement side. So I mentioned earlier about the Michael Jackson, Billie Jean video that we did. So we put that into an engagement article and sent live. But yeah, we toy around with all of it.
That's really good, and I'm going to move on actually, if I may. We've had quite a few questions coming through around how you use the tool to support learning, and there's two parts to that really. Is to test one of the questions, can you add formal assessments to test their understanding of process and policy? So obviously there's the testing the learning, but also how do you use the system to support the learning, whether it is about new policies, process, products, whatever it is? How do you use that system? John, I think I'm going to come to you first on that one.
Sure, yeah, no problem. So I think we view knowledge management to be really fundamental to the learning program that exists. So it has to become part of that training program. So it's a case of kind of training people to know that there is a platform available to get the answer, rather than train them on what the answer is on that particular training session, and embodying, kind of empowering people to utilize that as the resource, rather than just as kind of the last step of the training process. We've kind of on average seen that a successful knowledge program or knowledge implementation can reduce the training demands specifically, that's kind of formal training, by up to about a third, by giving them the ability to not necessarily know every single answer, but know what the processes are in general, and then where to go and get the specific answer. I mean, in terms of testing and understanding whether or not that's kind of understood, we can require that if you go to a particular article, that you confirm that you've understood it, or you can leave some feedback to say that that yes, this is clear, or no, this is not clear, I need some further assistance. We can actually have as Paul's mentioned, there's things like feedback and content suggestions, but we've also got things like a request training button within the homepage, so that if you're feeling you're struggling, actually formally request that through the platform, and then someone from the training team can follow up on that. And outside knowledge management, so actually within our knowledge platform, we don't specifically have things like quizzing and things like that, because we really focus on the key elements of knowledge. But within the wider Verint portfolio, we have things like performance management, which can integrate directly with knowledge, so you can see how many articles are viewed on average per call, and is that hitting the kind of recommended amount? And if it's not, then let's issue a coaching session to support them. And really, we see a direct correlation. We talked about Sainsbury's. They saw a direct correlation. We've got a graph showing the number of articles viewed per call goes up in trend with the ultimate satisfaction of the customer who was on that call. So there's a distinct correlation between how much you're utilizing knowledge and how good or how well received that call is.
It's interesting. One of the questions that's come through a couple of times actually on the board is what resources are required to manage a knowledge management program, and I guess part of that, Paul, comes down to how much information you have and how much how much you need to be supporting it. Do you have a view? How many people do you have supporting knowledge management in your Equinity?
Yeah, so at the moment we have 4 full-time FTE, and we have separated them through Equinity's core products. So Equinity has 4 or 5 core products, so each of them will deal with a particular core product. We've then got 3 additional FTE, so we're up to a maximum of 7 at the moment, and it's their role to pick up on the updates of these articles. So the 4 FTE that own these sort of business areas, they'll be focusing on maintaining that information, keeping it clean, keeping it easy to read, the nitty-gritties that have to be sort of located tomorrow as opposed to today. Whereas the 3 additional will focus on the new stuff that comes in, and they'll kind of act as the first eyes before the expert guys get their eyes on it to make it into reality.
Okay. John, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I think this is something that changes massively, as Paul mentioned, really depending on the type of content, the change rate of the content, in terms of how many people are actually involved. Some of our clients don't have any FTEs at all managing knowledge. It's a part role for 1 person or 2 people. Some of them utilize the kind of SMEs to do a lot of the content management. And as Paul mentioned before, it's okay for someone like an SME to write content, because it can go through maybe an approval layer where somebody can make sure it's accurate, make sure it's formatted correctly perhaps, and then finally, a third publication approval layer or something like that, before it actually gets consumed, and make sure it's accurate. Another example we had was with, I won't mention them by name, but a very large global logistics company, have a deployment of about 4,000 agents. It's across about 16, 17 countries. So it's a very complex operation. Centrally, they have a team of 3. So they have a knowledge manager, they have a content owner, and a statistics role as well. But then they effectively utilize non-FTEs within the different operational areas or regions to assist in that. So it's centrally managed by a team of 3 for 4,000 agents across 16, 17 countries. But it's kind of distributed around. So it really varies. It's normally quite light touch.
And I guess that there's having a knowledge management approach, but it's all underpinned by technology. Invariably, you've probably got a system. Obviously, Equinity, you've got Verint. And there's a couple of questions that have come in around the system. And Paul, I'm going to come to you first on this. And John, I will let you add a comment if you so wish to. 2 parts to this question, because they're from 2 different people. One of them is if you were to implement a system again, what would you do differently? Is there any tips or advice that you would, and this is really some of your learning, and obviously it's a while since it's 3 years since you implemented the system in the first place. So if there's any advice that you could provide there. And the second part to that question, the second question there is, how long did it take to get 100% agent confidence? And the question is, until it became the only source for information. So yeah, any tips and advice for anybody that's implementing systems now, and how long did it take for you to get that 100% confidence?
So I'll start with the second part of that. Excuse me. 100% confidence. Gotta be honest. I'd probably say it took a good 18 months, maybe if not longer. 100% confidence is always 100% confidence based on what you've got, right? So it's always based on what you've got currently available to you. If a new service gets introduced, if a new product gets introduced, that confidence may start to dip slightly. So with their 100%, I would say it took us, about 18 to 24 months realistically. But it's never finished. You can never comfortably sit back and say, I've got 100% confidence long term, because knowledge management is a game that changes day by day. And you've got to really be on the ball, which we can do through Verint's very easy tools. What would I change? Oh, it's a good question. If you'd asked me that about 2 days ago, I probably had it all pre-ready, could have told you everything. I would say probably get more of the business involved earlier than later. So, Equinity, we've got offices in 120 different countries around the world. And one of the things that we held off on was going live in multiple countries, just because we wanted to see how it would work locally first. And I think what we found out was that actually our approach to the UK actually worked for our offices in the US and in India, actually, because they're where our customers can contact. So we probably could have went earlier, live there earlier, if we'd engaged with them, but we just took the decision not to. So that would probably be my only thing that I would have changed if we'd done this again.
No, that's good. John, did you have any thoughts on that question?
It's a tricky position for me to say what would we do better next time for our clients.
What advice would you give to anybody that's looking at a knowledge management system?
I think Paul touched on it. It's get as much of the business involved as possible. Try not to do this as a kind of another silo of knowledge within your kind of headspace or your perspective of what the business wider needs. And even if you're focused on contact center, speak to what the customer services team are doing. Speak to what the back office are doing. Try and get a view of the wider picture. Try and get a view of what everybody views knowledge to be and where they're moving with, and try and weave that into what it could be a solution that starts within contact center, as Paul said, starts within the UK within contact center, but becomes something much wider and more successful by involving all those people as soon as you can.
No, absolutely, and thank you. And I guess there's another question here that actually was on my list of questions to ask, and that's around using knowledge management to support self-service. There's obviously a real drive around digital and having access to quick things through websites and other platforms. So the question is it good practice to integrate any knowledge management system with content knowledge on a public-facing website? John, I'm going to come to you first on that.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly recommend it would be best practice for the primary benefit of being able to have full visibility of both what the customers are asking, as Paul mentioned, really good example. You can see exactly what the tone of voice is from customers because they're going to be potentially the same people who are calling up into the contact center. So that conversation is the same conversation. It's just being served through a different portal or different interface. So from a consistency perspective, it makes a great deal of sense to get that input, that messaging and what's happening. From a delivery of knowledge perspective, what it means for having both of those different kind of audiences is that actually for a single knowledge article, you could have a single question with an answer for both an agent and for a customer. So when you're making changes, you can see that both of those need to be updated. You're not siloing them into different teams or different systems and technologies. You can make changes across both of them. So from a consistency perspective across the board, it makes a great deal of sense. Do you need to deploy them both at the same time? Of course, no. It would probably make sense to focus on one and then start with the other. I think right at the top, I mentioned we used to see self-service as the only utilization of knowledge back maybe 10, 20 years ago. Then we started seeing self-service and then contact center implemented. Now it seems to have shifted around as contact center is the biggest input. Paul is a good example of where that didn't necessarily make sense for them, so it does change. But generally we are seeing this kind of multi-channel approach to knowledge as being the most successful the way to approach that. And it doesn't just stop as customer self-service. It could be back office staff, it could be field operatives, it could be employees more widely, as I mentioned, for HR. You can serve all of those from a single platform if you need to.
Thank you, John. Paul, I'm going to come to you with my last question, and it's basically what happens next. Where do you go from here? And this is for you at Equinity, but also if you've got a view in terms of where you think knowledge management is going. Obviously, we heard a little bit about it earlier, but a final thought from you, please, Paul.
Absolutely. So go back 3 years ago, I would have never have thought of knowledge management as a concept, to be honest with you. It's some words on a page. I can read, I understand, right? That's how it is. So what I've learned in the past 3 years is that knowledge management never stops. You can have the answer to every question in your business, in your organization, but it will never stop. It will grow. It will become easier to read, content design, and on from there. So for me personally, within Equinity, we've got a lot still to cover. We've got more office locations, we've got more products, we've got newer products. So our 2020 is chocked with stuff. And we're not showing any signs of slowing down anytime soon. So for me, it's all hands on deck, full steam ahead with Equinity. Where I see knowledge management going, especially now with COVID and sort of working from home being the new norm, and more people wanting to get answers and not be able to phone, with reduced number of staff and things like that, I can only see it getting bigger. And I can only see that more companies are getting on board with this, if they haven't already, to make self-serve, especially online, if the customer facing, more apparent when you visit their websites. I know that's something that Equinity we're potentially looking to do as well. It playing a massive role in our day-to-day as we go forward.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you so much to both of you. Thank you, Paul from Equinity. Thank you, John from Verint. Really appreciate you coming and sharing your expertise with us today. And just so that everybody knows that all the questions that we didn't get to answer today, we will be putting them on a link that you'll get following this event today. We will send you out an email. It will have the questions, and it will also give you a link to a website where you'll get more stories around how Verint is supporting contact centres with knowledge management. So for now, what's next from us here at the CCMA? Please don't forget to check out all the events that are on our website. We've got some member events coming up, including the Atom Bank virtual site visit on the 28th of July, which is going to be really quite exciting. We've got more training coming on board now on stream, so please do check out the virtual training. And we've also got podcasts and events from the past, recent past, that you can also replay. So please do go and check out those. You also might be aware that the CCMA is involved with the European Contact Centre and Customer Service Awards, and they are currently open for nominations, and their deadline is the 28th of August. And we have a load of categories that really look at the kind of work that you've been doing over the last few months and the responding in a crisis, but more importantly, there's also a load of work and projects that you were doing ahead of the crisis that quite possibly enabled you to respond in the way that you did. So please do check those out. And for now, from me, and thank you again to Paul and to John and to Verint for sharing your experiences from a system perspective. Thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye-bye.